This 42-minute video posted by Nick Shirley on X has garnered 110 million views over the course of 3 days. It is currently December 29th as I'm recording this video. So 3 days ago, he posted this. It's at 110 million views as a 42-minute video. That's gotta be setting records. It's up there with like Justin Bieber tweets. Anyway, Nick Shirley went around and he filmed an expose in Minnesota. And he posted this to his YouTube channel as well. Check his YouTube channel out. The video, like I said, was 42 minutes long and it was titled, quote, "I investigated Minnesota's billion-dollar fraud scandal." Now, I don't know exactly when he recorded this, but it was probably within the past month, more than likely, because he travels around the country day to day, depending on what's going on. And he is extremely hard to get a hold of, especially right now, as you might imagine. But Nick is a 23-year-old independent YouTuber and independent journalist who's been traveling all over the country for the past, like, at least for, I think, 3 or 4 years. I first started seeing his stuff pop up because he was traveling to protests that were happening all over the United States. And he was just attending these protests with an iPhone and a GoPro and just interviewing people out there, asking them what they're doing there, asking them like what their opinions of things are, and you know, just interviewing people at protests. I don't know how he's going to manage to do that going forward. He's going to have a security team. I think that in his YouTube description for the video, he even has like, hey, here's my security team that I'm needing to raise money to pay for. So whatever you guys can help, you know, whatever you can do to help me pay for security. He's going to need a lot of security after this point. I've watched all of his social media accounts grow by like 400,000 followers and subscribers across all platforms within the past 3 days. It's been insane. I've never seen anybody have more explosive growth than this young man right here. And he 100% deserves it because this expose exposed so much stuff happening in Minnesota, and we're going to get into it because there's a lot to talk about in regards to that. Now, like I said, Nick's a 23-year-old independent journalist, independent YouTuber. He's been doing this for a little while, and he's been crushing it. He's been just him and like a small crew, maybe 1 or 2 people. And in this most recent video that he filmed in Minnesota, he worked with a guy that was identified only as David, who was a local dude who raised suspicions after years of observing empty facilities up in Minnesota, specifically these child daycare centers, these licensed child care centers, and also adult care facilities, some healthcare providers, and non-emergency medical transport businesses in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area. And they did that during weekday business hours. They visited up there during weekday business hours. Many, if not most of them, appeared to be locked, empty, or inactive despite receiving substantial public funding through programs like the Child Care Assistance Program, which is a government subsidized program that taxpayers pay for in order to subsidize like childcare. Some of the big examples from the video that he put out there was the Quality Learning Center, which was misspelled. It was supposed to say Quality Learning Center, but the sign was literally misspelled saying Quality Learning Center. And that specific establishment reportedly was receiving $1.9 to $4 million, but showed zero children activity, and it was licensed for up to 99 kids. Basically, they were claiming that they had 99 kids in attendance at that facility or were regularly attending. Other sites or businesses that were, you know, out there that they investigated were registered at single addresses with no visible operations at all. And there was confrontations where staff refused questions or accused Nick Shirley of being, you know, immigration's customs enforcement, which obviously he's not. He's just a, you know, a YouTuber, independent journalist. Throughout the video that Nick Shirley filmed, he claimed that his team documented over $110 million in payments to suspicious entities in just one day. And he framed it as part of a larger scandal potentially involving billions in taxpayer funds linked to Somali-owned or operated businesses in Minnesota. Now, while he was up there, he was pretending to essentially be a parent that was seeking enrollment of his children. And as he covered this, he called it, quote, "the largest fraud scandal in U.S. history." Now, this video, like I said, has gone completely viral all over the internet. Unbelievable. The dude's blown up the internet completely. Like I said, it's already got over 110 million views on X alone, millions of views on YouTube within days, spreading rapidly through, you know, conservative circles, reaction streamers. Vice President J.D. Vance retweeted this, praising it as better journalism than Pulitzer Prize winners. Elon Musk commented on it and retweeted it multiple times. FBI Director Kash Patel highlighted it indirectly. And also, in addition to that, The FBI Director Kash Patel said on Sunday, December 28th, that the Bureau would, quote, continue to follow the money in Minnesota and protect children, adding that the investigation very much remains ongoing. He also said, quote, however, even before the public conversation escalated online, the FBI had surged personnel and investigative resources to Minnesota to dismantle large-scale fraud schemes exploiting federal programs. Fraud that steals from taxpayers and robs vulnerable children will remain a top FBI priority in Minnesota and nationwide, he wrote. He also additionally said, quote, to date, the FBI dismantled a $250 million fraud scheme that stole federal food aid meant for vulnerable children during COVID. So I posted a video back 1 month ago that I titled Inside America's Craziest, Biggest Fraud Scandal. And it was about the Feeding Our Future scandal. So if you haven't seen that, it's only 18 minutes long, 18 minutes and 33 seconds. You can go check that out. That kind of goes into really descriptive detail on these food subsidy programs that were supposed to be feeding children that were living in impoverished areas that didn't have enough money to cover food. And it's bananas. This is what the FBI had investigated for a while, and there was a bunch of charges and people that were thrown in prison. It was probably one of the largest fraud schemes in U.S. history, but this childcare thing is a whole nother addition to that iceberg. This Feeding Our Future scandal might just be the tip of that iceberg. Anyway, as a result of this video that Nick Shirley posted, there's been heavy criticism of Governor Tim Walz, which, by the way, on the 27th, one day after Nick Shirley posted his video, Governor Tim Walz posted this picture on his X account that said, Happy Catter Day. And if you look in the comments, he got absolutely roasted. I mean, you can look at these comments. People are saying tone deaf bastard. One of the most offensively tone deaf posts we've ever seen. And then people are like, Grok, make the cat Somalian sitting on piles of cash and gold. Stop using your cat as a distraction to massive fraud you allowed in your state by Somalis and your party depends on for your votes. Are you aware that fraudsters in your state have been submitting fake claims to divert billions of taxpayer dollars to fund wild spending sprees and to max out donations to Democrat candidates? Just thought I'd let you know in case you hadn't heard. Anyway, happy Catter Day. Your state has $18 billion of fraud going on that you refuse to address or take accountability for. Instead of talking about cats, why don't you actually signal that you care? I mean, it goes on and on and on. He gets absolutely excoriated in the comments of this post. It was insane. Ballsy of them for them to post that while like one of the most viral videos ever on X is literally blowing up the internet. Anyway, he followed up on the 28th saying, quote, no one should have to make the decision between a paycheck and taking their child to the doctor. With paid family leave, Minnesotans won't have to. Anyway, basically he tries to deny, distract, delay. So the first time that Tim Walz actually responded to this whole massive fraud investigation happening, this is what he had to say.
This is what happens when they target communities for their own benefit. This is what happens when they scapegoat. And this is what happens when they no longer hide the idea of white supremacy.
So basically, he was trying to say that somehow this fraud being exposed is being done as a result of white supremacy. Here's Nick Shirley being interviewed on Fox News this past weekend, saying the big weekend show. And this is what he had to say in response to that.
So it sounds to me, Nick, that Governor Tim Walz is saying that you and others that are out there trying to expose this, you're doing it because you're white supremacists. What is your response to him?
Yeah, Tim wants votes. There are entire apartment complexes where white people have been pushed out of these apartment complexes because Somalians have taken over and they're inside of these towns like Minneapolis where they can go get votes from these people. And if you have 100,000 people that will vote for you because you're going to enable and let this stuff happen, and because you're going to call a white person racist for calling out facts, this is what's going to happen to a state like Minnesota. Minnesotans, they say Minnesota nice, but they are very upset. And I fully understand why they're upset, because they don't have a governor who's actually working for them. He's actually working against them.
Nick, your video's been viewed 93 million times. What do you think will be the result of this? Do you think that things will change because of bringing attention to this, or do you think it'll be much the same, swept under the rug and keep moving forward?
Yeah, there better be change. People are demanding it. The investigations have been launched just from that video alone. And so there better be change because, like I said, we work way too hard to be paying taxes. We work way too hard to be not knowing where our money's going. And at the end of the day, the people in the government, they work for us. We don't work for them. And so it's their responsibility to hold these people accountable. And so if there's not something that's happened, people are going to be very frustrated. And so if President Trump's watching this, it's time to really get down to nitty gritty and to make a difference in this place of Minnesota that is pretty much like Somaliland right now.
Now, one of the things that always happens every time something goes extremely viral or, becomes a big topic in the news, people start, making wagers on it and guessing at what things are going to happen as a result. One of the things that happened on Polymarket is somebody introduced will anyone be charged over daycare fraud in Minnesota? And right now, as of the 29th of December, 2025, Polymarket is predicting a 44% chance that anyone will be charged over daycare fraud in Minnesota. Now, I can tell you right now that there's a lot of people out there that are expecting the federal government to respond viciously and quickly. Now, I know some people are like trying to say, oh, well, there was nobody there because it was the holidays, or there was nobody there because it was during holiday periods. It's like, no, there'd be at least somebody there. If there are employees there, but there's no kids there, that's a little suspicious to me, I'll give you a small story. My brother used to be an elementary school teacher. And when he was an elementary school teacher, there were government assisted breakfasts, essentially, which was like subsidizing meals for impoverished students. He worked at a school that was in a very poor area. I'm not going to say where or when or any of that stuff. But anyway, it was a very poor area, and they do school breakfasts for, essentially it's like subsidizing food for impoverished communities. And a lot of the times that was the only time that those kids would get breakfast because their parents didn't take care of them. Their parents wouldn't feed them. Oftentimes the food that kid eats at school might be the only food that kid gets the entire day because the parents are either inept or they're just completely not present, or they just don't care. So that kid might only get to eat during the time that he's at school, which is really unfortunate, but that's just the fact of the matter in some of these impoverished communities. It's a systemic thing. If it's happening in one part of the country, I guarantee it's happening in a lot of other parts of the country as well. So that being said, if kids from poorer areas oftentimes don't eat except for the subsidized food that they receive at school, I guarantee you, if those same types of parents are in other major cities or major urban areas and stuff like that, have the opportunity to send their kids to a daycare to get them out of the house so they don't have to look after them, they're going to take advantage of it. So even if it was during the holidays, if they were able to send their kids out there to a daycare to get them out of the house, they're going to do it. And if these daycares were specifically targeting impoverished communities, essentially as subsidized daycare for impoverished communities that the federal government was paying for with taxpayer money, those people are going to send their kids out there to be put in daycare because that's what's going to happen. That's not like a hypothesis. I'm telling you, that's just plain facts of the matter. Now, like I said, Polymarket believes there's a 44% chance that anyone's going to be charged with fraud in Minnesota over these daycare stuff. Now, the problem is now that this thing is blown up completely out of proportion and been covered by tons of people all over the place, like independent journalists, which, by the way, something I think that's been interesting about this specifically is the fact that traditional U.S. mainstream outlets have largely not covered Shirley's video specifically as of December 29th. For example, the New York Times hasn't really talked about it. They talked about it a little bit, but it was very wave tops. Washington Post hasn't really made anything about it. CNN hasn't really talked about it. MSNBC hasn't really talked about it. ABC, PBS, NPR, they've largely not covered it. If they did, it was very slightly and just kind of dipped your toes in the water and left it largely alone. Most of the coverage of the video has largely come from Fox News, The Daily Caller, Red State, PJ Media, Times of India, Hindustan Times, Live Mint, Daily Mail, of course, because they jump on everything because if it's viral, Daily Mail jumps on it. Axios briefly mentioned it in the context of the administration's responses. But yeah, it's largely not been picked up by a lot of mainstream sources, surprisingly, especially considering how insane it is. The problem is, though, I look at it like this. If there is not a federal response, a serious investigative federal response to this, if nobody gets charged with a crime after all of this stuff has been exposed and nobody goes to jail, that's going to be a significant blow to the credibility of the federal government to respond to corruption. That's not speculation. That's not me taking a shot in the dark. I'm telling you right now, if after this thing has gone completely viral, like we're talking about, hundreds of millions of views across all platforms, shared millions of times by tons of people. If the federal government doesn't respond swiftly and nobody gets charged and nobody goes to jail and nothing happens to these people who have literally been stealing taxpayer funds to funnel into their own fake front companies, it's going to be a significant blow to the credibility of the federal government to deal with corruption. That's just what's going to happen, because people are going to lose faith that folks are going to be held accountable if they commit crimes like this. So hopefully that doesn't happen. I know that FBI Director Kash Patel announced that they were going to be pursuing this stuff. The U.S. Labor Department also mentioned that they were sending a strike team in one report, but details tie more to state/federal oversight. Now, here's what my assumption is. I think that there's a possibility, because the fact is it is explicitly legal and required for government officials in Minnesota to conduct in-person visits to these licensed or certified care providers, including for the purpose of verifying compliance, investigating potential fraud, or ensuring the use of public funds under the Child Care Assistance Program, and just making sure that everything's up to snuff and that there's no sketchy stuff going on. If these care facilities are like sitting there existing as like physical locations and there's a bunch of fraud happening and there's no kids actually being taken care of, what that leads me to believe is that there is nobody visiting them to ensure that there is compliance. And where does that have to start from? Well, if they're coming from the government, either they're being threatened not to go, so they're afraid to do that, so they're afraid to do their job, or they're just extremely lax in their maintaining compliance standards and stuff like that. Because these programs are coming from federal funding, that's a real problem. Because if state employees, there's state government employees, are not enforcing federal laws, the only people that can go up there to make sure that they are in compliance with federal laws and that they're enforcing federal laws is by physically going there. Now, the Minnesota Department of Children, Youth, and Families, formerly part of the DHS, and county licensors are authorized and mandated to perform unannounced annual inspections of licensed child care centers per Minnesota statutes and rules, including federal CCDF requirements. Additional unannounced visits for complaints, maltreatment reports, or investigations is also warranted. Licensors have the right to enter facilities during operating hours to review records, observe operations, and verify compliance with health, safety, and attendance standards. Results of those visits, like annual inspectors find, are publicly posted on the DHS licensing information lookup site. Now, for the Child Care Assistance Program specific fraud concerns, the Office of Inspector General within the state government has the authority to conduct audits, investigations, and site visits when there are suspicions of improper payments, false billing, or overclaims, i.e. billing for children not present, like billing the state government to provide them with federal funding or taxpayer money for children that aren't present. Providers must grant access to records in facilities. Refusal can trigger payment suspension or other actions. State law allows withholding of payments or administrative disqualifications based on fraud findings, often involving on-site verification. Now, they have all these rules in place, right? There's a lot of oversight things in place to prevent this fraud from happening. But why isn't it happening? Why isn't it being enforced? Well, most of the critics believe that this comes from the governor's office, and that the governor's office, who's been also accused and implicated from FBI investigations, have pointed to lax enforcement or infrequent, inadequate inspections as contributing to potential fraud, not to any legal prohibition on visits. So a lot of audits that have been done have also found massive gaps in oversights, including not enough unannounced checks or record validations. But the authority to conduct these audits has always existed and is supposed to be exercised routinely. So if government officials have to visit these places in person to verify against fraud and are legally required to do so as part of the licensing and program integrity efforts, why hasn't that been happening? And who's preventing that from happening? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe somebody out there does. Now, I've also seen some other folks talking about like speculating that some of these institutions have made political campaign donations to elected officials. I haven't seen anything personally about that, so I can't verify if that's accurate or not. I would be careful trusting anything that says that or makes those claims without following up and doing some actual due diligence to look up on, because campaign donations are supposed to be open source, transparent. You should be able to view that. So before you assume that's fact, I would definitely do some due diligence and check that out. Now, I will say that some of the critics against this note that locked doors or limited visibility does not prove fraud, and that full verification of fraud actually occurring is going to require official investigations. But again, if the state government is not enforcing laws because it's benefiting them, because everybody's just passing the money around. If it's like a big washing machine for money and they're just passing money around, not saying that's what's happening, but if that's what is happening, if that money gets washed and it's being used to do other nefarious activities, of course that state government is not going to enforce compliance with laws that would then stifle the amount of money that they're getting washed to conduct whatever nefarious purposes they're conducting. So the only real way to verify that this is not happening is by sending in oversight people to ensure that there's compliance with federal law, especially for things and programs that are paid for with taxpayer funds. Now, the last thing that I'll leave you with is this. Apparently, some viral social media posts and videos, primarily on X and TikTok, shared around December 29th, today, involving the allegations of fraud in Minnesota's Child Care Assistance Program, highlighted the Sweet Angel Child Care Incorporated, which was a licensed child care center in Minneapolis that's been active since 2021. Now, this is one of those other places that folks have been saying is potentially a ghost daycare that's receiving public funds. Multiple reports and posts allege that Sweet Angel Child Care received approximately $1.26 million in CCAP funding in 2025 and was supposed to be licensed for up to 74 children. This figure appears in a lot of conservative-leaning outlets, and now there's no official state audit confirmation of exact 2025 payments for the specific center that's been found in public records, but it does align with patterns in the ongoing federal and state probes into the CCAP fraud that's happening up there, with dozens of investigations, some linked to Somali-owned centers. Now, the biggest allegation I've seen with this is that the phone number listed online for Sweet Angel Child Care is 651-201-3400. And if you call that number for the Sweet Angel Child Care, it routes you directly to the office of Governor Tim Walz. Some users tested it and heard the governor's office's greeting. The same number, 651-201-3400, is the official public contact phone for the Minnesota Governor's Office, confirmed on minnesota.gov/governor/contact and multiple state directories. Now, this could stem from a data error, could be an outdated listing, could be intentional misinformation in public directories, who knows? But it is strange that the number listed for Sweet Angel Child Care does appear to route directly to Governor Tim Walz's official office line. It's a little weird, just saying. Either way, to sum this whole thing up, something has to happen. Whether, I'm not saying that it's true or it's false. What I'm saying is that there obviously needs to be an investigation, and it needs to be done federally, because obviously there's something going on in the state of Minnesota that's preventing adequate auditing from occurring. And there needs to be some significant oversight, because if you don't follow up and you don't do something to ensure that they are complying with federal law with taxpayer funds, people are going to lose faith in the federal government's ability to prevent fraud. And that's a real problem, because we need faith in federal institutions to do the right thing. And we need to have faith that they're going to have integrity. So right now, this video that Nick Shirley posted has more views than any of the daily readership of all newspapers in America combined, according to Elon Musk right now, which tells me that this thing has spread so wildly out of control that at this point, everybody's tracking on it. So the only thing that's left now is to see what the federal government is going to do about it.